First of all, Andrew, may I say thank you very much for having me here in the Northern Cape, and may I wish each of the members of the Fourth Estate that are here today a very happy New Year. I'm sure you're enjoying a bit of a break from the yellow party and getting to spend a bit of time with the blue party, but it certainly looks like all roads lead to Kimberley this week. Obviously, we're here because of the drought. Now, failure to recognize the severity of this drought around the country that's gripped all 9 of our provinces, and any further delays in implementing mitigation measures against them will have catastrophic consequences, not only for these provinces, but also for the economy and our nation as a whole. And this is simply a stark reality which government can no longer afford to ignore for a single moment, and which surely has to be addressed by the President in his January 8th statement on Saturday. Now, the drought is not something that's happening far, far away that affects somebody else. The impact on our food security as a nation is an issue that will touch each and every South African. And as always, it will be the poor and destitute in our country who suffer the most. Our thoughts are with all residents and farmers affected throughout South Africa. And I can assure you, as Andrew said, that our party will be doing all that we can to assist and provide alternatives to ensure that these drought measures are put in place and to ensure that we can mitigate against them. We're very thankful for the rain that has fallen in some parts of the country, but obviously we're going to have to fundamentally change the relationship with water in South Africa. But nowhere is the looming catastrophe of the drought more evident than here in the Northern Cape. And it's perhaps a blessing in disguise that the ANC have chosen to have their January 8th statement here, because the President, as we've seen from your reports, has been on the ground out and about in the province for the better part of a week. So there's no doubt that he would have seen firsthand for himself the devastation and suffering that this drought is causing for the people of the Northern Cape. So that when we tackle him in Parliament on this drought, he cannot turn around and tell us that he was shocked and it's something he's hearing for the first time. He's been here on the ground in the Northern Cape. It is something he must have had to grapple with firsthand. Now, there's nothing that the President or I or anybody else for that matter can do to make it rain. But there's plenty that governments can do to try and lessen the impact of drought on residents, as well as to protect food security in the country, as well as assisting our agricultural sector. Poor planning, crumbling infrastructure, and rampant corruption greatly exacerbate the effects of a drought. And it goes without saying that these issues need to be addressed in every province. Now, if there's one thing that the DA knows only too well, is that climate can wreak havoc with your best laid plans, as well as your commitments to deliver to people. 3 years of crippling drought brought the Western Cape and the city of Cape Town in particular to the edge of what we termed at the time day zero, initially the day where the taps would eventually run dry. And it was only through a massive and sustained effort by both local and provincial government, as well as business, civil society, and above all, ordinary residents, that day zero was eventually able to be avoided. Now, Cape Town's handling of the drought response is today widely hailed as a textbook case in how to manage precious water resources. One of the reasons it received so much attention at the time, both good and bad, was because the city spent so much time updating residents on the details of the situation, sharing information on the proposed solutions, and imploring people to save every last drop of water. Now, while Cape Town's residents managed to avoid day zero, the drought in the Western Cape is far from over. Parts of the Karoo, the West Coast, and the Overberg district are still in great danger, but at least there is a plan in place that includes a sustained infrastructure repair rollout, maintenance and upgrades, rainwater harvesting in all of those towns and cities, alien vegetation clearing, and the adoption of a provincial smart agriculture plan. Because, like the Northern Cape, the Western Cape relies significantly on agriculture and supporting farmers and farming operations to be able to boost its economy. Now, an important part of that plan was the triggering of Section 25 of the Public Finance Management Act, which allowed the province to release over 50 million rand in drought relief funding. And it's extremely worrying that none of the other provinces affected by this drought seems to share this urgency and concern. The Northern Cape may be the worst hit, but the Eastern Cape, the Northwest Province, Limpopo, and Mpumalanga, the Free State, KwaZulu-Natal, and even Gauteng are all facing their own versions of day zero, whether in residential areas with residential taps running dry or in sustaining livestock, agriculture, game, and crops on farms. In towns like Butterworth in the Eastern Cape, day zero has already arrived a long time ago, but there's hardly an outcry in the media. You don't read about it, you don't see it, and many other Eastern Cape and Free State towns are not far behind their own day zero beginning. Here in this province, as Andrew has said, agriculture and the agricultural industry is on its knees. Farmers are suffering, farm workers are suffering, and the economy in the Northern Cape will eventually suffer as this drought increases its grip. And while measures such as the drought plan, the early warning system, and the plans for a fodder bank that have been launched here must be lauded, it's simply too little too late, and it's also not going to be enough to get this province out of the situation in which it finds itself. Now, the President is here on Saturday addressing the nation, and I appeal to him to use this opportunity to recognize the urgency of the situation and to prioritize an adequate response. Now, the most important action is to distribute direct funds towards drought relief measures. Each province has its own unique challenges brought about by this drought, but common to all of these provinces and all of these towns and all of these cities is a shortage of funds to be able to adequately address and implement meaningful mitigation plans. Now, the Finance Minister in February will have an opportunity in the upcoming budget speech to address this. But each province can, through Section 25 of the PFMA, direct their own funds to these particular provinces. If the premiers of these provinces do not do so, then the President of the Republic of South Africa should be compelling them to do so. He must step in. He can't leave it up to their discretion for a moment longer. I would also like to reiterate the call that we made in October last year, to the COGTA Minister, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, to declare the drought in South Africa a national disaster. National government has a duty in terms of the Constitution to step in where provincial and local governments do not have sufficient capacity or funds to take care of the citizens on the ground, or where the national economy is at risk of being harmed. This is such a time. This drought is a clear and present danger to the economic well-being of the country, to the economic well-being of the provinces affected, and the ordinary everyday lives of the citizens in these provinces. And it was simply unconscionable for government to turn a blind eye a moment longer. Do the right thing, declare the drought a national emergency, ensure a national disaster, ensure that the funds are then redirected to these provinces, and that we can start to alleviate the suffering of people and to start averting the potential food security crisis. Now, equally unconscionable is that in the midst of this huge national problem, the National Minister of Water and Sanitation and Human Settlements, Minister Lindiwe Sisulu, is languishing under allegations that millions of rands of taxpayers' money is being channeled to fund her own campaign for ANC Deputy President in 2022. Now, if this is indeed the case, it is frankly unconscionable, and the President has no option but to deal swiftly and firmly with her. At this time, in a face of crisis like this, internal political contests should be the last thing on a minister's mind. What should be on a minister's mind is how they step in to address this crisis. And we cannot have public funds, limited public funds, being squandered on personal election campaigns and priorities. Now, it's estimated that over 37% of all rural communities in South Africa are affected by the drought. An Agri-SA study at the beginning of last year found that around 30,000 farm workers had lost their jobs due to the drought. And this number has no doubt climbed exponentially since then. So we have to act, and we have to act now. It's not a matter of finger pointing and blaming and trying to point score. It's about working together. We in the Western Cape and other parts of DA-controlled municipalities have been through this before. We have expertise to offer. We've reached out to various other provinces to offer that insight and assistance. And it's now time to work together to combat this particular national crisis as a unit. So let's stand together in tackling the drought crisis. We've shown in Cape Town it's possible. Let's do the same now for the Northern Cape, and let's do the same for the rest of the country. Thank you very much.